Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to talk initially here about something called a payment delivery scam. This thing has been hitting businesses and individuals like crazy. And I had two customers that it happened to just last week. I've had this email address now that I am still using for more than 30 years, a very long time. So I get a lot of emails, and I thought, well, maybe it was just me because I've been using this email address since, I think, 92, give or take. So why am I getting these, and are other people getting them? And I've asked around a little bit and got some feedback. Yeah, it's happening. And then I had a couple of calls from clients, and this is what's got me concerned here over the last week. And that is, apparently these are spreading like wildfire. I had one client who has a new accountant, and she called me up because she got an email and she wasn't quite sure if it was legitimate or not. It was an invoice, and it was an invoice for one of the buildings that they have. They have 3 locations, saying that they owed, I think it was like $600 or maybe $800 in order to get heating oil this winter, and they needed to pay it right away. And at the top, it had a legitimate business name and the logo. And in fact, if you went to online, you did a search for that business name, sure enough, they came up, and yeah, it's the same logo. But when she dug in a little bit deeper, she found that it had a different phone number on the invoice than was on their website. And that's when she started to really start to wonder and gave us a call. Now, we looked with some detail at the headers on the email. You might be familiar with email headers. They can usually be used to dig in and find out which server did they originate from that email, what servers did it go through, what kind of anti-spam testing was applied to it, and, putting all of that stuff together. And it's important to do all of that, frankly, to have a close look at it. So that's what we did. And we found out, okay, wait a minute here. This came from a Microsoft-hosted domain. Now, remember, Microsoft, with their Microsoft 365 crazy, bad, ridiculous product, not that I have an opinion on the matter, allows small businesses to set up their own email domain. And life is good from that point on, except that, of course, their security is just being under so much heavy fire for very, very good reason, particularly if you only buy the base licenses from Microsoft. We've talked before about how Microsoft 365 doesn't guarantee that your data is going to stay intact, that it isn't going to be lost. Microsoft has lost data from some very big corporations who sued them, and the corporations lost in court. Microsoft won because it's quite clear, yeah, we don't do backups of your data. Anyhow, the emails that ended up in the hands of the accountant were legitimately delivered from a Microsoft-hosted domain. So when you look at it, even when you're digging in from the technical side, the emails all looked okay going all the way through. So somebody spent some time on this. And so when the accountant called me up, I asked her, hey, is this a company you've dealt with before? Now remember, she was a new accountant at this client. And the new accountant said, I don't really know. And I told her, well, the first thing to do is check to see if this is an actual vendor, right? Do they actually deliver the heating oil to the office? And if they do, then maybe it might be legitimate. But ask them if it's a legitimate invoice or not. And so, okay, so she did that. And they said no. And I also told her, well, ask the business owner if you don't know and see if he has an idea about this. And he said, no, they are not a legitimate provider for us. So when she called them up, she told them, hey, listen, somebody's sending out invoices on what looks to be your letterhead, if you will, your invoice head with your logo representing as you, and is trying to get me to pay the bill. So I dug into that more, and I wrote a really kind of a detailed article here about my favorite ways to protect yourself from falling victim to these types of scams. And I've got right in there, if you go, you have to click through from the newsletter to my website, but there's 6 different points. And I try to make them unique, right? There's the obvious ones, and I try not to emphasize those because we talk about it so much, but, using unique passwords and stuff. But with something like this, how do you know if it's a legitimate email, a legitimate invoice? I've got all kinds of samples. I've just been saving all of these phishing emails for years. So I've got many, many samples. And some of these samples are from PayPal, supposedly, where I need to pay my PayPal invoice. Others have been for Bitcoin that I bought, and I needed to Venmo some money over for Bitcoin, and some of the others as well. There are thousands of these people out there who are trying to get you to send them money. So I want to really warn you about it. It is out there. It is a big deal. Do not give out any personal information unless you're the one that has initiated contact with what's effectively a trusted source. So how do you do that? Well, it's old school, everybody. When you're looking at the invoice, look old school. Even though the invoice may come in an email, it may have a PDF, and some people print them up and, still do the old paperwork on them. But double check to make sure it's correct. Another thing that we've seen is invoices have been stolen. So it's the invoice template, if you will, or the emails that had that PDF in it or the invoices in it. So the account was compromised. I've seen this. It's happening. It could happen to you. And then what the bad guys do is they put onto the bottom of this little message that says, oh, our ACH number has changed. If you're an accountant, you know what that is, a bookkeeper, a business owner, because that's the way you can transfer funds directly for very little cost. It's not like wiring money. It's nowhere near as expensive. And it's almost instant as well. It's pretty darn quick. So what they'll do is they'll take the invoice, a legitimate invoice from a legitimate vendor of yours, and they'll modify that so that at the bottom it has maybe a different bank account number, or it says, like the one that I just saw, that they've changed their ACH destination, and here it is. So you then think, well, I thought I paid that invoice, or maybe I haven't paid it yet. Then you send the money to the bad guys directly. The money goes very, very quickly. According to the FBI, once it's in the bad guys' hands, it's usually out of the country in about 90 seconds. And many of these bad guys own banks. Isn't that crazy? So if you're trying to claw that money back, once it hits their bank, it's gone, right? You'll never, ever see it again. So initiate a phone call yourself. Call them up on the phone. You don't have to use that rotary dial phone or that touch tone phone that may be hiding somewhere there in the office, right? You can use your smartphone, your cell phone, but look them up online again, right? We don't have yellow pages or white pages anymore. Although I did get one a couple of years ago. It was kind of surprising. And it was from a third party. It wasn't a real, if you will, yellow pages from the phone company. But look them up online. Give them a call. Maintain a relationship with the vendors that way, okay? Now, if anybody calls claiming to be from a company asking for sensitive data, especially if it appears out of place, don't provide them with anything until their identity has been verified independently through official channels. Now, I had an interesting call this week, too. One of my people who does tech support called up a client and told the client, hey, I'm from Mainstream, and I had to make a couple of changes to your email account. So I had to reset your password. I have a new password for you. You ready to take it down? Okay, there you go. Thanks. And then afterwards she realized, maybe that other person, because they seemed a little edgy, thought maybe this was a scam call. Maybe Mainstream wasn't really their provider, right? We have some clients that are pretty big. Not all of the employees have ever even heard of us before. And when it boiled down to it, though, it wasn't my tech calling up, asking them for their password, because she didn't. It was my tech calling up and telling them what their new password was. So you see the difference? So a call like she made can be perfectly legitimate. In fact, it was legitimate. But calls where they call you up and ask for your password are not. And I have seen that where they say, hey, we're doing upgrades. We're going to upgrade your Windows, your Word, whatever it is this weekend. And so I just need your username and password so I can log into your computer and check it after we're all done. And guess what? Yeah, it was the bad guys, right? Those hosers trying to hose all of that money out of your account. Hey, I want you to get this list of things that you can do to protect yourself from these types of scams. It's absolutely free. You can go to my website at craigpeterson.com. But I have things like this, tips every week that you can get for free by going to craigpeterson.com/subscribe. Get my insider show notes and my tips, craigpeterson.com/subscribe right now. You might have noticed in my newsletter, I was talking about the secret weapon that hackers can use and do use to dox nearly anyone for just $15. So we're going to talk about doxing and how you can stop it. So I guess our first question is, do you know what doxing is? It's been around since the early 1990s. It's kind of an internet trend, and it's where people go and try and find information about you, for instance, and the main idea behind it is to kind of publicly embarrass people. Now, there are some guidances out there about how you can protect yourself, what you should do to protect yourself from doxing, but they're looking for things like your real name, your address, job, phone number, other identifying information. It's PII is what it's considered, personally identifiable information, and they'll often take that information and publicly post it online on different kinds of community forums. Reddit's one of the popular ones. Nothing wrong with Reddit per se. It's just a place where they'll post all of this personal information so that they can shame you or embarrass you, or in some cases come after you with criminal intent. Now, speaking of criminal, it is illegal to dox someone in California if it rises to the level of online harassment. But personal information that's publicly available is, and legally obtained obviously, is typically not a crime in most states. Now, where doxing has really shown up and bothers me maybe even the most isn't public figures so much, although obviously it happens. You know, we've seen these protesters in front of Supreme Court justices' homes. If you're a left-wing protester, you can be right there in front of the house. If you're a right-wing protester, you got to be a few blocks away from the house. But in either case, they know where the justice lives. And how about your kids or grandkids? Where are they in the doxing scale? Well, you know, there's a lot of mean kids out there. And I was bullied growing up. Probably almost everybody was bullied by somebody. And I had a problem. They knew where I lived, and they would get me coming to school, usually in the morning, sometimes coming home from school in the evening. And it got pretty bad. They pulled 2x4s on me. I had a knife pulled and put to my throat, just all kinds of stuff, right? So that's a problem. but at least I could try and alter my way home to get around the bullies. It didn't last for the whole school experience, right? And they moved on, they got bored, and life was okay at that point. But how about our kids and grandkids who have smartphones and have people at school or elsewhere that really don't like them, that want to embarrass them, that want to harass them? They can't get away from those phones. They are addictive, quite literally addictive. And I've read some studies on the chemicals and the chemical interactions, but the chemicals that are released in your brain that cause you to really become addicted. And how many people do you see that are scrolling through messages or who are playing video games all of the time, as much as they possibly can? It's a real big deal. So doxing, which is also sometimes called dropping docs, document, right? Doxing is a problem. So I went online and looked up a little bit more, and I wrote an article about it as well, so you can find out a little bit more. But I love this article from 404 Media Co., and it is talking about doxing and the problems that you can run into. Here's a picture that they have on their website that, again, I've got a link to it in my newsletter. But it's a photo of a mask. It's got this black mask and a box of 45 auto rounds. Okay? And it's meant to be a threat to whomever that was sent to. And, it can just be a stupid kid being stupid. But it could also be something legitimate that you've got to be careful of. So this guy who wrote the article said he went on to Telegram. He went into a Telegram channel that is known for doxing. That's where you go if you want to find out the information about somebody. And he entered in their name and the state that he believed this person lived in and hit enter. And then the bot spat out a file containing every address that person had ever lived at in the U.S., all the way back to their college dorm more than a decade earlier. The file included the names and birth years of the relatives. It listed the target's mobile phone numbers and provider, as well as personal email addresses. Finally, the file contained information from their driver's license, including its unique identification number. All of that cost $15 in Bitcoin. And the bot also offers, if they have it, the Social Security number, too, for $20. Can you imagine that? And for you to get your reputation back after someone has stolen your identity can take you 300 hours. And most of the time, people don't even bother trying to get it all cleared up, unless, of course, there's being theft, or they bought a house in your name, or they sold your house that you're living in, because they have all that information. Where does this come from? And that's the interesting part to me. We know that the credit bureaus like Experian and Equifax and TransUnion, those are the three big ones, have all of this information. All right. Well, it's supposed to be kept confidential, isn't it? Well, we're not going to get into Equifax and the massive hack that they had. They lost, I think it was over 200 million people's personal information. Okay, so that's one way the bad guys can get it. They can get it on the dark web. They can buy one of these data dumps or thefts. But through what this author here at 404media.co is saying, through a complex web of agreements and purchases, that data trickles down from the credit bureaus to other companies who offer it to debt collectors, insurance companies, and law enforcement. We've talked before here about how federal agencies, including the FBI, who are not allowed to track us and get personal information and keep those files unless they've got an explicit reason, right? They have reason to suspect, but they're still not allowed to collect a lot of that data. They just go to these places and buy it. Isn't that amazing? So this particular Telegram channel has tapped into that. Okay, they've gotten some of this data apparently by stealing former law enforcement officers' identity, and they're selling unfettered access to the criminal cohorts online. Isn't that something? So if you want to find out where the cop that arrested you lives, what the job is, where he's been, his wife, children, aunts, uncles, brothers, sisters, you can probably find it. So they tested it looking for information on Elon Musk, Joe Rogan, Joe Biden, and it got it. It got it. And 404 Media, this website, verified that although not always sensitive, at least some of that data is accurate. Wow, eh? So there, some of these communities, the tools advertised in include these swatting rooms where people will call 911 and coerce a SWAT team to get involved, right? To go on out and break down your door, and then the nastiness happens. So be very, very careful online. Make sure you get my newsletter. This was in the newsletter. Don't miss the next one. They're absolutely free. I'm not pushing something on you. I'm just trying to keep you informed. Go online to craigpeterson.com/subscribe right now and sign up right there at craigpeterson.com. We've been talking about doxing and how it can hurt you, could hurt your business, certainly could hurt a politician, a government official, and our children and grandchildren. So now we're going to talk about what you can do to help prevent doxing. I think I should start by kind of explaining a little bit more about what's going on with these wonderful credit reporting agencies. Basically, what they've done is they've come up with a way around the laws as they stand. And they're getting around those, obviously, so they can make some extra money, right? That's my opinion, but I think it's pretty obvious to almost anybody. And TransUnion, for instance, is aware of its brand recognition in the criminal underground. TransUnion said, at times, fraudsters will pull data from other sources and misrepresent it as our data. Okay. But here's the problem above all of that stuff. There is, on top of all of this mechanism that they have set up that allows people, businesses and others, to be able to get at some of this information. And it's more or less legal, okay? So this is a bit of a problem. But these criminals have access to a tool over at TransUnion called TLOXP. And the direct relationship with TransUnion and the direct ability for TransUnion through that TLOXP tool gives them direct access to your data. Now that's a bit of a problem here. In one of the few well-documented cases of abuse of this TransUnion tool, Forbes covered how an amateur rap crew used it as part of a $1 million fraud spree in 2018. That was years ago. Now, that's a little bit of a problem, isn't it? And talk in this channel that we were talking about here at 404 Media, in that channel over Telegram, is that the TLXOXP is the database that has really caught on by the criminal underground. Now, that's obviously a very, very big problem. But they've got all of this stuff, okay? The criminals also mentioned using some different companies in these Telegram groups that they claim to use: DataTrack, SearchBug, US Info Search. Now, again, there's tools that are made available to skip tracers, people who try and find you, creditors, etc., who you might owe money to, and they want to know where you're at, and so they want to be able to find your relations and go talk to them, put the squeeze on them, right? data brokers who are supplying data to private investigators, right? So the PI is their customer, and they'll go and do on-site visits, etc., right? It's really something, okay? So do you want to know what they do to qualify you as a private investigator? Well, they'll go on site to the private investigator's office, and then they'll make sure they have a locked filing cabinet and a shredder to properly handle records. All right? Now, DataTrack said at the time of the criminal gaining access to this massive data trove from the credit agency, all the company did was a remote confirmation where the applicants asked to provide various pieces of identity and security verification virtually rather than in person. So you can see all of the holes in this. It's just crazy when you start really digging into it. And this goes on and on. Now, let's talk about protecting yourself, because once your data is out there, and unfortunately most of our data is because these credit bureaus did not keep our data safe. And if you were part of the class action suit, you might have gotten literally a few bucks, and you had to prove, by the way, that you had spent all of this time and spent all of this money to try and recover your identity. So hopefully you kept good records of those 300 hours that are estimated in order to recover everything. But even then, they won't give you money for your time, just for any direct costs, like if you hired someone like a private investigator to do a little bit more for you, right? A racket. 200 plus million people, their data was stolen. And does Equifax fire anybody? Does anybody go to jail? No. Now, there's a company out there that I have been asked about before. It's called Delete Me. Seems to be a pretty decent company. 404 Media talks about it here in this article. And they have new services all of the time over at Delete Me, and some are a little better than others. But the problem is we're talking about a game of whack-a-mole. Your data is out there. It's on the dark web. It may be available for free, and you can check that, by the way, yourself for free by going to haveibeenpwned.com, haveibeenpwned.com. Great site, trustworthy site. Troy Hunt runs it. Check it out, haveibeenpwned.com. So you can see if your data is out there in the dark web. Obviously out there in the dark web, right? There may be places that Troy isn't aware of, but how do you do the tracking? That's kind of the big thing. But how do you get the credit bureaus to stop selling your information? It can be really, really difficult. So a lot of people have turned to Delete Me. It's not a total waste, but it's frankly almost impossible to have them delete everything about you entirely. And, here that's a problem, right? Because according to Delete Me's Gilmore, he said that the credit bureaus will not remove you from the data sets, but they will not sell it in certain conditions. And the bureaus make it really onerous to try and get out of there. They never purge the header data. And that's the data that they're selling, by the way, the header data, which has all kinds of personal information on you. Header data sounds so innocent, doesn't it? But it's not. That's the data that has all of this information that the fraudsters need. It might not have detailed information, but of course that tool that we were just talking about does have all of that information in it as well that are being used by the bad guys, that TLO XP tool. So almost impossible to remove. You can check out Delete Me. It's probably a good idea for you to do that. There needs to be more regulation here because this is our private information, and once it's gone, we're never going to get it back. And I don't know. I don't think it's too late for you, but it might be, but you got to do something, right? So how do you protect yourself from doxing? Well, first of all, try and get the credit bureaus to remove your data from their systems, or at least to stop selling it. So you got to contact all 3 of the major credit reporting bureaus. You need to go in to your social media accounts, and you need to make sure that your profiles, your usernames are private, so that people aren't going to be able to find you. That's terrible, but neither are the bad guys. Obviously, remove any addresses, places of work, specific locations from your accounts. Anything that helps to identify you. Do not have it in any of your settings. And also, do not have any posts with any of that information. We've talked before about how it's a problem for people to post, hey, I'm going on vacation next week, because the bad guys might be watching that, right? They might be targeting you, the business you work for, the business you own. Set your posts to friends only, and just those simple things are going to go a long way. But check it out online. You'll find it, again, at 404media.co. Make sure you're on my email list. Get my weekly emails, and you will be in front of Cloud, right? We're all told, use the cloud. Oh, what a headache cloud has been for me and my customers. So I want to give you some advice as to what I do for my personal data as well as my customers' data. As my wife constantly says, the cloud is just a word for another person's computer. And a computer that you don't control is what I really add on to that. Microsoft 365 being a really great example. Microsoft has what they call a shared responsibility for your data. And a lot of people just assume, hey, I'm paying Microsoft, whatever it is, 10, 20, 30 bucks a month for my email account and SharePoint and my Teams rooms and everything else. So I'm all set, right? And of course, the answer to that is no, yet you are not all set. The Microsoft user agreement does not provide that they are not going to lose your data, that your data is not going to be ransomed. And there are a number of cases. I was just doing a search online where they're talking about how Microsoft really messed up, and they've had a lot of lawsuits over it where they lost data. Now, one of the things, too, that it can be a real problem when you get right down to it is the backup of the data. Microsoft will kind of more or less maybe keep your data around, your emails around, your files, the things in your OneNote and OneDrive. But in reality, a lot of that stuff is it does not have any sort of guarantee from Microsoft. And they do lose it. In fact, they lost from one of the big accounting firms records of thousands of their employees and, of course, their customers, those employees' customers. And Microsoft wasn't going to do anything about it because they don't do anything like that. The other real thing that's confusing about the Microsoft 365 stuff is the levels that they have, right? They have a whole bunch of different business levels, enterprise and regular users, and they all come with different abilities, including you can get more in security if you want it, and then you, of course, got to configure it all and set it all up. But Microsoft 365 has become just incredibly commonplace in business. Now, what we do for our customers is I go in and we have a backup program that we run in our own owned data center. So your data, right? Our customers' data never leaves our hands. But we run these programs that go out to Microsoft 365 and pull down everything, all of the information from Microsoft 365, and then store it locally. And we have had to do restores for our customers. Now, somewhere around 80% of the time, apparently, it's a user that messed up. They deleted a whole bunch of stuff, and Microsoft does have the ability to do restores, which is good, right? And those restorers are hopefully okay, but the restorers are just of deleted emails or deleted files, and they're only kept for about 30 days. It kind of depends on your license and what the data is. And if you don't notice it for more than 30 days, you're completely out of luck. The same thing's true when it comes to lawsuits on some of this stuff, okay? So it's very, very commonplace for people to use Microsoft 365, but businesses and individuals don't realize what they're getting into, right? The basics are not covered when it comes to cloud backup and recovery. And Microsoft is not giving you any sort of a warranty about losing your data. And what happens if they get ransomed, which can happen, there's no question about it. So you can't count on Microsoft yet again, right? I'm not a Microsoft fan. You guys already know that. But they've come a long ways, so that's a good thing from Ballmer days and Bill Gates days. But there's two hard truths that you really need to consider here when you're planning on using the cloud. And I've been talking about Microsoft and picking on them, but it's true for any cloud service. It can be anything. It could be Salesforce.com, many, many others. You have to make sure you step up and accept the responsibility for the safekeeping of your data. That means you've got to go through, configure it as safely as you can, and then you've got to download your data and put all of your data somewhere locally so that you have it somewhere hopefully safe and encrypted locally, right? All of that stuff's true. And if you don't keep it safe, well, it's your fault. It's kind of what it boils down to. So shared responsibility is just crazy. Because if you're trusting Microsoft to do this, you could lose access to your intellectual property, right? Your patent information, legal information, accounting information. You might no longer be in compliance if you're in a regulated industry, if you've lost access to certain information. If the entire company loses access to emails, there's an attorney who sued Microsoft for $1.75 million, a guy out of New Jersey, because Microsoft had blocked him out of his email, so he could not correspond with the courts or with his clients. So now there's a potential problem here of ethical violations. Yeah, I know, attorneys and ethics, right? Yeah, okay, I get it. You don't have to point that out. But they for months blocked him from getting in, and he called their tech support people. I did that for one of my clients that had lost a lot of emails, that spam was being sent out from their tenant, and just a terrible, terrible situation. And so we opened a ticket with Microsoft, and we spoke to a really nice guy at Microsoft, and he knew nothing about any of this stuff. And frankly, I think he was just kind of, trying to give us a hug and help us along. They never resolved any of the issues, ever. It's crazy. And we reached out to them 2 more times. I did personally. And we never got any resolution from them. The most recent one, and I've just given up on her, is a lady who claims to be calling me, right? And so the phone rings. I answer the phone. Hello, hello, hello. And after 30 seconds, she hangs up. And so I send an email saying, what's going on here? Oh, I tried calling. Okay, well, call back again. Because I'd already filed 2 other tickets. Microsoft was able to reach me at that phone, no problem. I know there's no problem with the phone. So a couple of days later, she calls back, of course, after 5 p.m., thinking I'm not going to be working. And I answer the phone. Hello, 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 hello. This is Craig. Hello. And she hangs up again. Right? It's so annoying. And I never did end up resolving anything with her. And you can't report them, right? I have a daughter who runs a major call center, and this is a problem that they've had too, where people will call and the person answering the phone doesn't want to talk. I just don't feel like it today. And so they do the same thing. They just sit there with their microphone on mute, waiting for the caller to hang up. And in my case, I hung up once after 30 seconds of saying hello. In the other case, she hung up on me. And then the third case, well, she's just left a voicemail. It's so annoying. But they fire people like that ultimately, right? They have to put them on report and blah, blah, blah. So you could lose the entire company. Access could lose to emails, SharePoint, other apps. Salesforce is based on multiple automations that have been built into Microsoft, and those are going to have to be rebuilt. It just goes on and on. So it's a word of warning. This whole, quote, shared responsibility thing means it isn't shared. Microsoft is pushing the responsibility for the safety and security of your data on you. And again, that's true for most of the cloud backup, or not cloud backup, but the cloud providers out there. So keep an eye on that if you are using cloud anything, all right? Online backup for Microsoft 365 is crazy important. Now, ransomware is expected to reach $1.75 trillion in payouts 2025. Isn't that something? Microsoft 365, as of right now, is somewhere around 300 million users. You can tell by that they're making a whole lot of money, aren't they, on their Microsoft 365. But you got to be careful, too, because what if you have insider threats? What if you end up in a lawsuit? Do you have access to the email accounts from people that no longer work for you? Right? There's so many things to consider, and there's some good advice you can find online. You can poke around. If you want some more advice, as always, just email me, me@craigpeterson.com. I am here to help, no question. I'll help anybody. We'll get on a phone call. I'm not going to charge you for it because I don't want you to get into these really, really tough positions that so many people have been, have frankly found themselves in over the years. So important stuff there. Now, I also was talking about the Kennesaw State University election hacks. This is in Georgia. And this is very, very detailed. It's an article from the Gateway Pundit. And it talks in detail about how the election machines were hacked. And the Kennesaw State University had them, knew they were hackable, and that they had been hacked, and they reported it to the FBI, who really didn't pay any attention. Apparently, this is according to the article in the Gateway Pundit, the FBI never even looked into it. They closed the case without any consideration. Just crazy. Tons of security holes. EVs, the Biden administration now, they are going to be buying cobalt, which is a rare earth mineral that's needed to make electric vehicles, as well as many other battery-powered things, by using child labor in unsafe mines. And then I've got a great article that I put up on my website, important for business people, about securing your data, keeping the business safe. I've broken it down to some nice, simple steps. CraigPeterson.com. You'll see it if you dig in past the homepage. All right, everybody, sign up right now. CraigPeterson.com/subscribe. Take care. These are exciting times, let me tell you. I want to talk a little bit about this whole artificial intelligence stuff and the webinar we had this week. There's a few of us got together on Zoom, and I went through what AI is really meaning to all of us. These are exciting times. I want to say a quick shout out too. I had 3 case studies this week that I did, Raymond and Leanne and Harriet. And I just want to say thanks, guys. It was really a whole lot of fun, and I am so glad I could help. These are absolutely free. All three of them, well, two of them were retirees having problems with computer stuff. And, you know, I've been, at one point, like 20 years ago, when I was kind of the, computer expert sort of a thing, I've been receiving these phone calls about, hey, I get a blue screen of death. What do I need to do? And that's not what I like to do, right? Because it gets just too narrow, too specific to an individual person, their computer, their problem. So what I've decided to do, and this is another thing that I'm kind of a kick in the butt, but I've decided that, hey, I'm going to go ahead and make myself available. So I have a few time slots a week that I open up, and Mary manages that for me. In fact, if you email me at craigpeterson.com, Mary's more likely to get to your email first. By a long shot. It can take me more than a week sometimes when I get really busy to get to those emails. So being able to sit down and do a case study with people, I think is a great thing. And then ultimately what I want to do is take those case studies, edit them up a little bit, get rid of the more private information that's in them, because we record all of them, and make some of those available to everybody. Because let me tell you, the problems people have are not unique to them. It's kind of like businesses, right? They're all about 90% the same, give or take. So it's something to seriously consider, and when you get right down to it, it's really a public service. That's what this show's about, right? That's why you guys are listening, because I provide hopefully some great content for you. And every week I get a few emails thanking me for what I do, and I really appreciate that, let me tell you, because this is a labor of love. I don't get any revenue from any advertisers or anything else. I let that all go to the stations, and it should, right? They've got lights to keep on. So do I. But every once in a while I pick up a new business client, and that's always rewarding for me. So shout out to those three for this week. And it was a busy week. It took up, I think so I think I only had 3 slots this week for these case studies for listeners. But if you're interested, you'll notice in the newsletter down in the signature area a little thing about how to be a case study if you are interested, and I can help you with your problem, whether you're a home user or big business or small business. I don't care. I'm here to help. No question about it. Well, this week, this is very, very cool, and I've done these before, but this week I had a great Zoom session. Now, Zoom, of course, everybody's been on. That's why I used Zoom. Zoom is not secure, but it didn't really matter, because this week what we talked about was the latest artificial intelligence tools that are out there. What are those? Well, ChatGPT, for example. It's pretty darn cool when you get down to it, because ChatGPT lets you do a ton of stuff and learn a ton of stuff from it. And we went through some of the things ChatGPT does pretty well, which is, just kind of vomit words. That's probably the best way to describe it, because it sure isn't great at doing any sort of analysis. In fact, it has no real ability to, other than the analysis of what's the next most likely word in this sentence. That's how this stuff works. It's generative. It just sits there and kind of generates responses. It really has no clue what you're asking for. And one of the things that I absolutely loved, Karen figured this out, my wife. She went into ChatGPT and she said, what kind of cybersecurity services can you offer? Now, this is asking ChatGPT. And ChatGPT, of course, is the big OpenAI thing. Everybody knows about ChatGPT. Everyone's an expert on it by now. Obviously, a little tongue-in-cheek, but I think we're over 100 million people now using ChatGPT. It's crazy, a lot of people. But they asked it, well, what can you do here for me for cybersecurity? And so it generated this long thing, and we talked about it in the webinar, that was total garbage, total fiction. right? And it talked about how they have software that looks for this type of a break-in, that type of a break-in, and how they do this type of analysis and that, and how they're going to save you from yourselves. And I sat there thinking, you know what? I came across a website from one of these managed services providers, and I think ChatGPT wrote everything up for them on their What We Do page. Because ChatGPT was talking about this software that OpenAI provides and these services OpenAI provides, et cetera, et cetera. OpenAI doesn't provide anything, any services for cybersecurity. It's absolutely incredible. And then people are taking that and using it themselves who know very little about cybersecurity. Man, I guess my life's getting a little tougher here because it used to be that people would hang up a shingle saying, yeah, I'm a cybersecurity expert, because they sign up with some big company that has everything you'll need to support your customers. And those big companies are often the wrong choice. I mean, really, really wrong choice. If you don't know what you're doing, you don't know how you do it. And in fact, one of them was hacked, a year and a half ago, so badly that it ended up hacking, because of this company that was being used by these managed services providers. It ended up hacking government agencies and tens of thousands of businesses worldwide. Yeah, so that someone could go and hang up a shingle saying, I are a cybersecurity expert. So it was fascinating sitting there. We generated some content for Facebook using ChatGPT, for Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube. It even writes some scripts of what you might want to say and even how to say it. Now remember, it's making a lot of mistakes, and people just don't realize that. A lot of mistakes. If you don't know the business or whatever it might be that you're talking about, you're going to be led astray. You know, if you're not an expert on the Roman Empire, you probably shouldn't be asking detailed questions about it unless you're going to do a lot more research yourself. And I'm talking to you students out there, because we showed ChatGPT and some of these other ones and how they're being misused to put together history papers, English papers. The list kind of goes on and on. So it was fun. It was a whole lot of fun. It was a much smaller crowd than I expected. Now, I wanted some people to be on it, and there certainly were very interested people who paid attention to my newsletter and got that invite and responded. But that was good. That was really good, because I was limiting the number of people who could attend anyways, so that we could keep it kind of one-on-one. And that's why I also set it up as just a regular Zoom meeting. Although, as you know, as I mentioned, I'm not into Zoom. Zoom's kind of dangerous. So we had our meeting, and a lot of back and forth and a lot of demos, and I want to just shout out to everybody who was on it. I think things went really, really well. So congratulations. And thank you, everybody. It was well worth it. Now, we're probably going to do some more, and maybe longer tail, if you will. In other words, a little more specific about some tools or some applications of the tools. Kind of hard to say exactly what we'll end up doing, but we're going to do something along those lines. In fact, the case studies this week, Leanne in particular, was really kind of eye-opening to me, because it was just such a difficult thing she's trying to figure out. You know, she'd been a school teacher for years, and now she's trying to take care of her mother and also try and figure out what to do with her computer that isn't working quite right. And so what was eye-opening to me is that, yeah, there are a lot of people that don't know exactly what to do or who to trust. And she needs to take her computer in for repairs down at the shop, and wanted to know, okay, now I've got all my financial information in here, everything, right? You think about what you have, right? You might have loans, car loans, home loans, bank account information. And so I pulled out the information from my newsletter a few weeks ago. Do you remember the one where it said how to Fort Knox your files? I thought that was rather clever. but how to Fort Knox your files on Windows, and how to encrypt folders and how to encrypt individual files. And it was a step-by-step thing, which we're doing a lot more of. That's part of our featured tip segment. And it was something that I reviewed with her because it was perfect for her, right? The store or the repair shop needs to be able to log onto her computer in order to make sure things are working after they've got stuff fixed. But then what? Are they going to be able to get at all of her private information? So I pulled out that newsletter and showed her the Fort Knox stuff. And I put it all into a little document for her that I gave her after we reviewed it there live online. So it was fun. It was fun talking to everybody. So thanks, guys, for this week and everybody that participated in our case studies. And if you're interested, just email me, me@craigpeterson.com. These are not sales things, right? I don't care if you're a home user, retired, and just don't have any money to spend on anything. This is to help. But, if you're a business, I'm more than glad to help. Stick around. The online world has changed, and nowadays your anonymity and privacy are more important than ever. We're going to even talk a little bit about what ChatGPT is doing in order to make our lives a little more, miserable. I included in my newsletter. Hopefully you got it. If you didn't, it's free to anybody. It is not one of these heavy selling things. I really am trying to help, okay? This is coming from a position of love. And the newsletters for a month or two now have had in the front of them a tip. And the tip is for you. And it's a step-by-step on how to do something that's crucial to your security, your privacy, your anonymity. And it's designed to really take you maybe 10 minutes to do. And the idea is if you do one little thing a week, you're going to, after a year, be a lot further ahead. It's kind of like that 1 degree thing. Did you ever read that book? I'm trying to remember what it was called, but the difference just 1 degree makes. Just a little bit of change every week is going to get you in a whole new place within a year. So if, first of all, you are subscribed and you're not reading these, take a minute to go back in the archive. And that's what I suggest to everyone too. If you are on my email list, you have your mail program automatically save the emails. I've even got in the bottom of the email, right near the very, very bottom, a tip on how to do that on the Google Chrome browser. There's other ways to do it on others, but it's important to save these so that you can search for whatever information you're looking for. Now, I know a lot of people will go to Google. You might try and use some of these tools like ChatGPT, but as a word of warning, these tools are not as good as having somebody who knows what they are talking about. I think it's really important because if you are just relying on some tool that's online that doesn't know much about you, doesn't know much about history, in fact, all it's usually doing is trying to find what it thinks is the best match for you based on what people have been saying, I can pretty much guarantee it's not the best idea for you. So saving those emails every week is going to make a huge change for you because you can go back and review them, you can search through them, find information about what you need. So I had in my newsletter, what we're going to talk about right now is a little bit about anonymity and privacy. And unfortunately, in this day and age, those two things actually mean almost exactly the same thing. Because unless you have some form of anonymity online, you are not going to have any real privacy. You might remember, this caused quite a storm a couple of years ago. I had an article that said, lie to your bank. That was my tip, lie to your bank. And the real idea behind this wasn't that you should be lying to your bank. Obviously, if there's official forms, if there's some government thing that you got to take care of, you don't want to lie about it. But if some bank wants to make some sort of an offer to you, you sign up for something, whatever it might be. And we're not talking about a bank account here or something else that might have to be reported to the IRS or other agency. Use a fake name. I have 5,000 records in a spreadsheet of fake names, dates of births, addresses, all kinds of fake information, because what I'm trying to do is just have a little privacy online. If someone doesn't need to know who I really am, they're not going to find out. Some of these identifiers, how do you say that? Some of these pieces of identification are male, some are female, they're all kinds of different ages, and I use them when I sign up for different things. And for 30 years now, probably longer, ever since I first got hacked and decided I needed to help other people not get hacked themselves, I have been using unique email addresses whenever someone asks me for an email. Now, you might ask me, hey, Craig, how do you possibly use a different email address? If you look in my 1Password, in fact, you'll see that I have all kinds of website information in there. It includes things about special notes, usernames, passwords, just kind of all of the stuff you might expect. And there are a lot of them in there. I have over 2,000 entries in 1Password. Well, that equates to probably hundreds and hundreds of websites, which equates to hundreds and hundreds of emails. Now, there are a few ways you can do this fake email thing. What I've been doing for a long time is not a fake email, it's a real email, is I've been using something called plus addressing. So my email address is, as you guys know, it's me@craigpeterson.com, right? I get emails from you guys every week thanking me for what I do, my wife and Mary and everybody for all of the stuff we're doing. And it's great. Please do. I'd love to hear from you, me@craigpeterson.com. But if I sign up for something and I want to use my me@craigpeterson.com mailbox to receive those emails, I have turned on something called plus addressing. So I might have a website that I go to. So let's say it's campaign.com. So what I would do for an email address is I'd say me, M-E, the plus sign, campaign, or campaign.com at craigpeterson.com. So what happens is that email address then is sent to me plus campaign at craigpeterson.com. It gets to my mail server, and my mail server knows, okay, what he's doing here is he wants me to flatten this into just me at craigpeterson.com. But it leaves the whole to address alone. So what I can do now is I can apply filters. Yeah, it does get a little complicated if you're trying to really kind of remain a little bit anonymous and keep your privacy online. But okay, great. So now it says flatten it. Here's the email, goes into my me box. And then I have a filter that says, well, if I get a mail from me plus campaign, what I want you to do is put it into this folder. And it goes into that folder. Isn't that handy? Or if I never want to hear from anyone again and I hit unsubscribe on their email and I'm still getting emails from them, I say, hey, put that in the big bit bucket in the sky. In other words, trash. And off it'll go, right into trash. Now, there are many ways to do this. In some cases, you have to turn it on explicitly. And one of the places that you might have to turn it on explicitly is if you're using Microsoft 365. Although I think now they may have it set up so that it's going to work for you and you don't have to have turn it on, right? So if you have a Microsoft 365 email address or whatever email address is, just try it. Send it to your email address. But right before the @ sign, put in plus and then something, plus test. And what'll happen is it'll show up in your mailbox or it won't. So that's one way to do it for a little bit of privacy. If you are an Apple user, you now have a new feature, which allows you to have Apple generate anonymous email addresses for you. So the email comes in and goes into your regular Apple mailbox. And then again, you can do the same types of things with your filters. But Apple's generating just random email addresses for you, which is really quite cool. There are a lot of flexible things that you can do there. One other one is Firefox has something very similar to that now with their mail, Mozilla, and there are a few others that you can find online. It's important to do. So we've got 10 tips to increase your anonymity and protect your privacy online. So we're going to run through those as soon as we get back. Visit me online. If you're not on the email list yet, on the free weekly newsletter, craigpeterson.com/subscribe. I promise it'll be worth signing up. We're going to go through the 10 steps that I outlined in my free newsletter to increase your anonymity and protect your privacy online. Nowadays, anonymity and privacy are pretty much the same thing. I have talked about VPN many times. People tend to think that if they're using a VPN, automatically, suddenly, for some strange reason, they are secure, right? Because it's encrypted, and it's encrypted. That means everything's going to be wonderful. The answer to that is no. That is not true for a number of reasons. There's some things you have to truly consider. So let's talk about VPNs a little bit. First of all, they are encrypted as a rule, right? But I want to kind of give you an analogy that I came up with some years ago when I was teaching one of these VPN webinars. And that analogy is you're driving a car. And let's say that you are driving from San Jose, California, on up to Oakland. So you've got some roads to drive on. You're going to go across a bridge, the beautiful new Oakland Bay Bridge, and then you're going to end up in Oakland, California. That's assuming you want to go to California. Okay, there's some pretty stuff out there. But anyways, that's a separate issue entirely. Or let's say you want to go from Southie in Boston on up north, right up to New Hampshire, or you name it, right? But I want a bridge in your mind. Think of a bridge, Brooklyn Bridge, whatever it might be. The VPN, I'm going to equate to the bridge. The VPN is carrying you and your data. It's carrying your car as you're driving. But before you get on that bridge, you're on roads, regular streets, maybe small streets, maybe scary streets. Then you're on the bridge. And then you're off the bridge and you're back on streets, aren't you? You got some big streets, some small streets, some scary streets, some bright streets, some dark streets. Or try saying that fast. The VPN is secure. If it might be, right? It probably is. So your data is secure as it is on that VPN going across the bridge. However, your data is exposed, just as you in your car are exposed, while you're driving on those other streets. You know, the back roads, the big streets, the little streets, all that sort of stuff. You are exposed. And when it comes to VPNs, most of these VPN servers are sitting in big data centers. Most of them are rented data center space. So they can be at an Amazon Web Services data center. They might be at a Microsoft Azure center. There's many more than that, but we'll just use those two as examples. If you are a bad guy, where are you going to go to get people's data? This is kind of like Willie Sutton, right? Where he allegedly said, when asked, why do you rob banks? Because that is where the money is, right? You're not going to go and rob a lemonade stand that some kids have on the corner and walk away with $10. You're going to try a bank that has a lot of money, correct? So off you go buying what now? A VPN service. That service is actually hosted in a data center, and that data center may well be tracking all connections. It probably is, frankly, in and out of that data center. So now you got a few different interesting problems. You've got the bad guys trying to hack what? Are they going to try and hack the lemonade stand the kids have for $10? Or are they going to try and hack a VPN server that's hosted in a public data center where they might get access to thousands, tens of thousands of people's accounts, information, where they're going, and maybe even trick a few people and maybe get at their bank accounts. Right? That list goes on and on. On top of it, a lot of these, and some of the most major VPN sellers, if you will, providers that you can find, some of the biggest ones out there who have said, we don't do any logging, we don't do any tracking, in fact, did both logging and tracking. The VPN providers, you see a whole bunch of them, right? They are actually owned by very few people and companies. Does that make sense to you? So they'll have one guy, in fact, who was shut down, had, I think it was 20 different VPN provider companies that he owned. All different names, all different marketing. And yet he owned them all, and he was selling your data. So these commercial VPN services have proven, for the most part, that they're not to be trusted. Now, I know some people do trust some of them. There's a website out there that says, hey, well, here's the best VPNs and privacy and security in 2023. And they name a few different ones, like NordVPN, ExpressVPN, and you hear these advertised on the radio, you're in, online, etc., etc. Interesting problems, because we're all faced with them. What do we do with our data? I want to point something out that you may not be really conscious of, and that is, if you're going to a website, let's say it's your bank, even if it's craigpeterson.com. If you go there right now in your web browser, let's do a little walk along here to craigpeterson.com. Look in the URL bar, no matter where you're going, your bank or whatever, kids' soccer team. You'll see a little lock right to the left. Usually it varies a little bit from browser to browser, but a little lock. Click on the lock. And it's going to pop up a little thing saying craigpeterson.com, connection is secure. Now, if you click on that, you're going to get connection details. And it says, okay, it is secure and the certificate is valid. Well, there's a few things going on here that you need to be aware of that, again, aren't obvious by looking at it. First of all, what does it mean when the browser says the connection is secure? What it means is that the browser's connection to the server where craigpeterson.com is hosted, or your bank is hosted, or whatever is hosted, that connection from your browser, from the moment it leaves your browser until it gets to that server on the other side, is encrypted. Kind of sounds like a VPN, doesn't it? Because it is. Now, your ISP, whoever's providing your internet service, can tell, okay, you went to craigpeterson.com if they really cared. But what they can't do is see what you are doing at craigpeterson.com. So you got to kind of question yourself. Do you want to be trusting that your internet service provider, whoever it is, Comcast, Verizon, T-Mobile, you name it, or do you want to trust them with the knowledge that you went to this bank or you went to that website? Or do you want to trust a VPN service, some of which are run by criminals, and that's proven fact. And others that might be hacked and they might not even be aware of it right now. It's an interesting dilemma. So I've got an answer for that, and we'll be talking about this. Again, we're reviewing the 10 tips that I had in my newsletter to increase your anonymity and protect your privacy online. Make sure you get my next newsletter. You missed this one. We got a featured tip every week, all for free. CraigPeterson.com/subscribe. Find it right there. Well, I've got another tip on VPNs, but I'm going to tell you now how to be anonymous. I mean anonymous with a capital A online. And that's important if you want to have privacy, but there's risks involved too. Most of the browsers that you use on a day-to-day basis track you. I can guarantee you that most of your internet service providers track you. There's no way around it, unfortunately. They have to do it as part of their daily business, but they also do it for a lot of other reasons, including what to sell you, how to sell you stuff, right, et cetera, et cetera. Well, there is something out there that was developed by the United States Navy and is continued to be maintained by the Navy, and it's called the Onion Network. Now, the Onion Network ties into the Tor browser. Maybe it's the other way around. It depends how you want to look at it. The Onion Network was set up to allow dissidents in foreign countries to be able to talk to us, to talk to their CIA handlers, to organize things within the country. It's the sort of thing that I would expect that people in Ukraine are using. Military people use it. It goes on and on. One of the biggest users of this whole network is bad guys, right? It's just like the internet isn't what you might think it might be. Well, actually, more than half of the traffic on the internet right now is streaming television, which is, I think, kind of a waste of bandwidth. But that's a different story. I definitely prefer it over these silly contracts that these cable companies try and get you in. But the bad guys use this Onion Network as well, and we're going to get into that and why that's a little bit of an issue. But journalists use it, particularly in countries where they might have a problem with the government because of what they're doing, what they're researching online. It can be a real problem, really, for everybody. So they put it together, the Department of Defense, to be able to communicate with these people, let them organize so that they can, topple governments and whatever else that they want to do or need to do. So the Tor browser is a free and it's open source browser. It's based on Mozilla Firefox, which is one of the more secure browsers out there. And it lets you browse the web anonymously using this Tor network, also known as the Onion Network. We're going to start calling it Tor, T-O-R, because that's the name of the browser you use. So this is a browser you would use if you want as much anonymity as you possibly can get. I would be careful about using it in a couple of different use cases. You don't want to do your banking with it. There's a few other things because of the bad guys that are lurking in those dark alleys that are out there. So the Tor network routes your traffic through multiple nodes. Now, these nodes are volunteer-run servers that have internet access. Or it might not even be like a server. It could just be someone's computer sitting in their home. And these volunteers are providing it in order, again, to allow dissidents, reporters who actually want to do their jobs, to be able to talk to people. Now, it anonymizes the data of anyone that's using the Tor browser, and it makes it really difficult to trace because what it's doing is it's hopping multiple places. Kind of think of the movies you've seen where, okay, he's going through this, he's going through that, he's going through this, guess what? You can't tell where they're going through, at least not with the level of precision you see on these movies and TV shows. It's really not there. But it's all encrypted as it goes from site to site. And when you go to a website, do you realize that you could be opening 100 different connections to that web server, because every one of the graphics has to be downloaded individually. Typically, we're not going to get into the latest technology, but just sticking with the typical, right? And the text on the page is another file it has to download. So there can be hundreds of things that it's doing and where it's going. So what the Tor network is doing now is it's taking that web page and getting all of these elements, all of these pictures, all of this text from different places in the country and potentially the world, so that no one who's monitoring on the far side, where it comes out of this effectively a VPN, no one knows who the actual originator was. Which is why the bad guys really love it, and I hate it that they do this. But we got to live with them, right? They're out there. We're never going to stop them all. So it's providing a real high level of privacy to anyone who uses it, anonymity, security, as you are accessing websites and services and networks that aren't blocked from the Tor network. Because there are some. Right? Banks often do this. There are known what are called entry and exit points to this onion network, this Tor network. And so in some cases they're blocked. I know for most of my clients, the businesses that I work with, we block the Tor browser because we don't want bad guys using it to remain anonymous if they're trying to hack in, right? Does that make sense? So the Tor browser also, because again it's Mozilla Firefox under the hood, and they're adding some more features, but includes some additional security features. It's got a script blocker, it's got an anti-fingerprinting system, and of course support for HTTPS everywhere, which is a browser extension you should install anyways. It's called HTTPS everywhere, and it just double checks if you're going to a non-secure website that's not encrypted, using that little lock symbol VPN I was talking about, then it'll check to see if that website actually has a secure side to it. Anti-fingerprinting is important too. The Europeans started this trend with their GDPR, their privacy regulations, and a few states have kind of done the same thing, where they're saying, well, you should have control over your information. So there now are cookie notices everywhere on the internet, and I'm sure you've noticed them, right? Only allow the necessary cookies to be able to use the website. Maybe add to that the ones that improve your speed, your download speed. Maybe allow all of them, right, so that you can be tracked. Well, there's a way around that, and that's called fingerprinting. So the way fingerprinting works is even if you have cookies turned off, they can query your browser and the information about your computer in order to identify you, fairly uniquely, in fact. Most people don't have the exact same configurations of everything and plugins on their browsers, et cetera, versions of the browser software. So that's called fingerprinting, and that's how they get around the cookie thing. Again, it's just another government ploy to make you think they're trying to make you more private or safer. In reality, no, none of that's true. Even Google's come out with this thing saying, yeah, we're not going to use cookies anymore. What they're doing is they're putting you in a box. So rather than having a very explicit definition of you, what you're interested in, your age, your family, the cars you own, et cetera, what they're doing is they're grouping you with about 1,000 other people. So they're saying, yeah, we're not identifying individuals. No. What are they doing? They're putting you in a bucket, a pretty small bucket, and then that's even of more value to a lot of the advertisers. Pick the bucket. So using the Tor browser, they've got all of this anti-fingerprinting built into this. Now, when you're using the Tor browser, you can access websites also that are only available through the Onion Network. Remember, the Onion Network is a network set up by the Navy. It's for dissidents and others to be able to communicate. And you can tell if it's an Onion URL by the extension, which is .onion, right? And it's something you can look at and look for. And there's even a search engine. There's a couple, but DuckDuckGo, I'm going to check right now as we're talking, has built into it an Onion capability. Let's see, Onion network. Okay. And there it is, Tor project, Onion routing. So anyways, so you can get to these different websites. This is what is known as the dark web, the Onion Network. And it's not all dark, but there certainly is a lot of criminal activity on it. And frankly, that's where part of this warning comes from. The warning is that the Onion Network, like any other internet-based service, has some potential risk associated with it. It has similar risks to using a commercial VPN, as I talked about earlier. And the most common risk associated with using Tor and the Onion Network is that your data is sent and received over the network and can be monitored and tracked at different points by malicious actors. Now, it's hard to do that. It's designed to be very hard to do, but it can still happen. These malicious guys, the bad guys, can exploit the network. They can set up, remember, volunteer nodes, little servers on the network. They can set up malicious Tor nodes that intercept traffic, steal data potentially. Other potential risks associated with it include maybe spreading some malware and viruses through the network that can cause damage to your system. So there's no guarantees, and I hate to say this, right? But there's no guarantees that you're going to be safe, kind of no matter what you do online. But when it's about protecting your anonymity, it is all about layers. And I've got a great article about layers up on my website as well. And those layers are easily accessible to anybody through the Tor browser. It's available for free for all of your machines, Windows, Mac, Android, iOS. And if you need something a little anonymous, that's the thing to use. Now, there are 8 more tips here that I have not gone through. Plus, I've got a VPN cybersecurity cheat sheet that you can grab as well. So if you want these 10 tips to increase your anonymity and protect your privacy online, just let me know. Email me at craigpeterson.com, and Mary or Karen or I will make sure you get it. Me, M-E, at craigpeterson.com. Take care.